Welcome to Mark My Words, a show that searches for the fork in the road in life, the place where the turning point in the journey of entrepreneurship and life can be found. Let's meet each other at the crossroads on Mark My Words. This episode is sponsored by GrowX Labs. Quick question. When you're leading a team or growing a business, who helps you think clearly? GrowX Labs offers executive decision support, real-time access to a trusted strategist who helps you navigate tough calls, leadership blind spots, and everything in between. No fluff, no long-term commitment, just fast, honest insight from someone who gets it. If you're a founder or exec and need a sounding board, go to growxlabs.com/mark. That's grwxlabs.com/mark and book a discovery call today. After being a top-level athlete his entire life, my guest today, Daniel Esposito, developed autoimmune conditions that eventually led to multiple lifelong chronic pain diagnoses. He knew that the only way he could serve his family was to fix it. He stumbled forward and backwards on his quest many times, but was determined to not only fix himself, but also learn as much as he could about these conditions that he has, and so he could be of service to others. He is the creator of the Undu method to give people a real solution to a very underserved population, the chronic pain population. He's a former NFL player who was diagnosed with multiple autoimmune issues, as I alluded to, including fibromyalgia and degenerative arthritis, as well as being a 4-joint replacement candidate, which is just mind-boggling. After reversing all these conditions naturally, he became a 2-time USATF Masters national champion, 4-time All-American, and world-ranked sprinter, which is also just completely crazy. He teaches athletes how to increase and maintain flexibility, avoid injury, and heal faster. He teaches organizations how to reduce time lost due to chronic pain and autoimmune sickness in the workplace. He can teach us as well. And that's what I'm here for. So, Daniel Esposito, welcome to Mark My Words. How you doing today?
Great, Mark. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you having me share my story with you.
Yeah, I know for somebody like me, anytime I get something in my inbox where I hear that they're a professional athlete, that is an automatic grab for me. But there's a lot more to you, like than just being a former NFL player, which is really impressive in its own right. But you've done a ton and you've overcome so much, and I can't wait to dig into your story and hopefully learn a lot, and hopefully the audience can learn a lot as well.
Yeah, no, so I mean, I know your audience, a lot of them are entrepreneurially minds, have mindsets. And the really interesting thing is when this started is when I was starting a new business. And it was, thankfully, my brother came on board to the business about a year or so after I started it because I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker to the point where I couldn't even, really get out of bed some days. And so going back to my childhood, because I like to, kind of frame the whole story, in three different ways. One is, if you're someone who suffers from chronic pain later in life, a lot of people like to blame that on childhood trauma, um, and completely discounting their diets, right? And they blame things on things like genetics. And unless you have a rare genetic mutation, like some people do, you don't really inherit chronic pain um, DNA. There's just some slower processes, right? It's just, and so when you put a really bad diet on there, that's what really contributes to it. But then I also talk about my childhood because, there's this kind of a spiritual component to my journey where, because of all the abuse I suffered from, a couple of alcoholic stepfathers that my mother, had put us in the homes with, um, I kind of discounted the idea of God. And I really, as a child, focused on two things in the Bible that said, oh, these two things are further proof of my, dismissal of a higher power. And it was, don't eat swine for it's unclean, and don't mix linen and wool. And the interesting thing is those are the only two things I pointed to. And they are both things that have massive implications in chronic pain, energy production, diabetes, things like that. So, but it's also interesting at that age. The good thing about the stepfather that I had is it forced me into entrepreneurialism, entrepreneurial spirit. He basically forced me to go knock on doors as like a 10-year-old to go mow lawns, and I was like thankful for that. After the first person said yes, I was like, oh gosh, this is great. And then that transitioned into me, I was very poor growing up, transitioned into me, well, I need to make more money because, I want to go to school and be able to buy my lunch. And so I would go to school with the dollar that my mom gave me, buy $1 worth of bubble gum, and then go and sell it. And I'd have $2. And then I'd keep, doing that over and over again. And then by the time I went to college, I started making t-shirts, a little co-ed, naked football, touchdowns, passes, and naked asses was the slogan that I had. So, and then, and just, other things. I was always sort of hustling, trying to find jobs or, ways to make money on the side. And then I eventually, so, in college, we'll talk about the sports thing. I didn't even play football till I was a senior in high school. But, my life as a child, I went to 5 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and 3 high schools. So I moved around a lot, and I found that sports was the way I connected with people. I was always an exceptional athlete, even as a child. I was always Presidential Physical Fitness Award and fast and, ambidextrous, I could do a lot of things. And so, I focused a lot on making friends, and school was sort of a side note, to me. And anyway, so I was fortunate enough to get into college, because my grades were not there. I walked on to Millersville University after playing 1 year of high school football. But that summer after my senior year and going into my freshman year, I was working out with an NFL quarterback. He just happened to go to the little rinky-dink gym that I went to in Northeast Philadelphia. And at the end of those 5 practices I had with him, he said to me, he says, you're really good. You can play in the NFL probably. And I was like, wow, I'm a kid who played 1 year of high school football, and this NFL player is telling me that I've got a chance. And I always knew I had a chance. I was always, I didn't play football, but when we would play pickup football, in the street, I was crushing everybody. So I knew I was better in some ways, and I just needed to learn football. So I didn't start actually until the 3rd game of my senior year. There was a couple scholarship guys ahead of
Wow.
me. I think by far, I wouldn't say by far, I was obviously the best running back of the 3. It's just that, that's the way football goes. There's only 11 positions on the field. But then I finally started. The first game I started, I was offensive player of the nation for Division II. I had like 326 total yards, running and receiving. Ended up the year with over 1,000 yards, like a 5.5 average yard per carry, whatever. Then the NFL teams started working me out, and the Redskins signed me. Then broke my jaw on the first play ever in my NFL career in Kansas
Oh my
City in
God.
2 places. I think it's also part of the journey that I've been put on. It's like, hey, get to the NFL, but I'm not going to keep you there. I just need to have that so Mark will have you on his podcast, right? So
Yeah, of
anyway,
course.
yeah, so they had cut me early, then re-signed me, and then so I had two contracts with the Redskins, and then the next year the Saints worked me out, signed me to a contract. They cut me after I broke my jaw there. And then they brought me back the first week of the regular season. And then I was there for, a handful of weeks and never lasted a full season, had four contracts, two broken jaws. That was my NFL career. Probably could have kept going. At 25 or 6, I thought I was old to be chasing an NFL
Yeah,
career. You don't have perspective of age at that point. But
yeah,
yeah, and then so much much later on is when these chronic conditions started happening. I was always super healthy, never got sick, and it really started when I started my energy brokerage. I was in banking before that. I was a wholesaler for Washington Mutual, who's now out of business. And I was doing very well with them. And I was like, well, I can't go back and work for somebody else that's going to pay me, 80 grand or, whatever it is. I need to be making more money. And I thought the only way I can do that is I really need to start my own business. And the energy markets had just become deregulated in Pennsylvania. And so without any energy experience, I started an energy brokerage, had no idea what I was doing for the first half a year, even more. And I was sick. It was really hard to really start doing this, but the sickness came because I was working so hard that I was ordering two pizzas a day, probably three times a week from Domino's. And I would eat those pizzas and I could feel the inflammation inside of my body, even though I didn't really know that's what was happening. I didn't even know what inflammation was at that point. I just heard it. It's just a word that people throw around. They don't really understand that it's a healing cycle, right? It's not your body attacking itself. And so when people have these autoimmune conditions, they're guesses, because an autoimmune condition is when you do a biopsy, you find a T cell in healthy tissue. And that's when you have an actual autoimmune problem. But any inflammatory disease, we're just slapping the label of autoimmune onto these diseases. And the reality is we've created as a society an overly inflamed body down to the cell. The cells should be a 1-to-1 ratio of omega-3s to omega-6s, right? Those are your fats. The average American is 15-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3. That's pro-inflammatory omega-6. So anytime you put some sort of stressor against the cell, that inflammatory response is going to be over exaggerated, right? And so the byproduct of that is pain and inflammation, and your body isn't being attacked. It's just an innocent bystander, right? It's not just, you're creating all this junk and mess in your body, and then that's causing pain and stiffness and redness and things like that. And so we just throw the term autoimmune, but the reality is the average American has a 15-to-1 ratio. So anytime you eat that pizza, your inflammatory response is going to be over exaggerated, right?
yeah.
So, obviously inflammation is the root of all disease. And now we've set the tone for our body to create more disease because of when we go just all the way down to the cellular level.
So let me cut in, and we kind of like jumped a lot of eras here. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah,
gonna. No, that's totally fine. You're good. Maybe I
yeah.
can come back to some things if I remember. But let me cut in with one thing. So you wound up like you were obviously, at least from my perspective, a real machine of athlete growing up, and just it's really impressive. It's amazing how people sometimes just fall right into something that you would think would take like tons of training and more years to really learn, and you just kind of jumped in and established yourself. Uh, met somebody that could, you impressed them, and you just had a real good time. Minus obviously the horrible broken jaw. I can't even imagine.
Yeah. Well, the
But
funny thing is the first game that I played where I broke that jaw, that quarterback was on the other team. It was Rich Gannon. I don't know
God,
if you know who Rich Gannon is.
I
Yeah.
am in. Oh my God, I'm a huge. So we grew up in the Philly area, so obviously I'm big Eagles fan, but I'm also a huge Raiders fan. I'm
Yeah.
sure
Yeah.
he was not on the Raiders at that time. I'm guessing he was
No, he was
probably
Kansas City. Yeah, he was
Kansas
Kansas City. He
City.
was
Yep, yep,
95. Yeah. Yeah.
yep. Oh
Yeah.
gosh, wow, that's uh, that's
Serendipity,
amazing.
right? Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I went before the Saints called me, I was at a pizza shop with my then girlfriend, and I little gumball machine with all the helmets in it, and I was like, "Hey, next team that falls out of here is who I'm going to play for next." And the Saints come out. 2 weeks later, my agent calls me, he's like, "The Saints want to work you out." I was like, "It's really weird. Like the universe just sort of, I feel like it's worked in my favor in a lot of ways, especially through this entire process."
Yeah, no, I mean, it happens in life, it happens in entrepreneurship, and you can almost kind of frame your athletic career even as entrepreneurship because at the end of the day, while you're in some cases a part of a team, you know, based on your story especially, you're your own advocate, really. So it's amazing to just see the entrepreneurial roots of your life and the impact of your early life. And I think where the thought was going here was how does somebody who's so used to being so resilient physically get up the strength and get up the desire to start up a business and maintain it and grow it for others while going through all the stuff that you've been going through. Because I know just doing what I'm doing with this and trying to explore other things, and I have a full time day job where I'm working way too much overtime at this point, and it's like that's enough just for me. Now I'm not an athlete, not certainly not on your level. So I'd be interested in knowing just how you were able to fight through all that and start a business.
Yeah. So once again, I kind of feel like God put some people in my path that helped me with that process, because if it was just me, it would have failed, because I was so sick. Like, not just so, my lymphatic system wasn't draining because of all the inflammation. I was puffy everywhere. My brain was felt like it was on fire. And just kind of go about the pain. I mean, the pain was a 10 out of 10, like all the time, nonstop, constant. I couldn't move. I couldn't turn my neck. I couldn't raise my shoulders above my head. It was constant. And then my mental health was failing as well, because you're in fight or flight when you're in chronic pain and inflammation. And that's not conducive for a family, atmosphere. So, I got one client came to me through a friend who I met, not even a friend, it was just somebody who had this client. It was a big, Popeyes developer, basically, who has, tons of stores. And I met her at some networking meeting, and thankfully that fell in my lap, and I've maintained them as a client since then. A friend of mine said, "Hey, Dan, I know you're in energy. Our condo is looking to, you know, save some money," which put me in contact with a big property management firm that, kind of fell in my lap. These weren't things I was going after. But if it wasn't for my brother and another partner of ours, Lonnie, the business would have failed. But we very early on, we were ranked in the top 100 fastest growing companies in Philly, 2 times. But then there was this transition where I was like, okay, I'm using these supplements, and I'm creating this space within my body and removing this pain. I have to turn this into a business, because if I could have had the information that I've collected and put into the Undu method 10 years ago, I wouldn't have lost that decade of my life. Like, it was literally a lost decade. And it started, unfortunately, with my first son, who's 15 now. And I decided I was going to fix it when my second son, who's 8 now, and I'm 54 next month. So he's 8 now. And 3 months before he was born, I was like, I got to fix this. Even though every doctor said there's nothing you can do about it, it's lifelong. You're going to have to start the joint replacements at 50. And I just said out loud to the universe, I said, I'm going to fix this. And then that's how I started, you know, the genesis of the Undu method and the supplement I created, Flexibility Fuel.
So, what kind of a mindset does it take for somebody to just say, you know what? I am not going to listen to some of the things that the doctors are telling me, and I'm going
Yeah.
to try to fix this on my own because doctors, while I feel are great for like a sounding board and getting like information you might not get otherwise, I know that sometimes there are just some things in life that like your body, as I told you before we started, I was born with a rare syndrome, and there are some things going on with my body that uh, primary care physicians, for as amazing as they can be and for as good as those appointments can be, as far as like just knowing where you're at with like your numbers and whatnot, they don't know
Yeah.
me and they don't know what I go through day to day. And I have found many ways to deal with things that not a lot of people know that much about. So I can really relate to the mindset and the choices you might have had to make. And also, we're both like pretty resourceful people, but certainly I am. And if you've done everything you've done in your life, I can pretty much say you are too. So,
Yeah. So mindset, syndrome, just kind of because I make it personalized, is a collection of symptoms. They don't, so like there's all sorts of syndromes. And if you start breaking it down to root level, you can kind of find out what's causing a lot of them. In not knowing all your health, I don't want to make any guesses. But for me, it's like you get diagnosed with something and then you just become tribal. Like that's my personality now. Like I'm one of these arthritis people, and you talk about your arthritis in your joints all the time. And being in chronic pain is a very hopeless place because doctors don't have answers, even though all these studies are out there that tells you what's happening to your body. Like I didn't invent any of this information. It's all out there, and I just had to figure it out. So it's important to not just accept what you're being diagnosed with, right? Do some more research, because I think it's like 30 to 40% of diagnoses are wrong anyway, or misdiagnoses. And but the first thing that ever happened to me where I felt like there was some relief, I immediately got hope. And once you have hope, you're driving forward, right? And you can only have that with a positive mindset, which is hard when you're in chronic pain because you're anxious all the time. You're in fight or flight all the time. But once that first thing kind of went click, and I was like, whoa, what was that? I haven't had a click in years. And it was directly after I had tried something. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try that more and see it. And it would happen again and again and again. And it was red light therapy, right? So I eventually bought my own red light and learned the science of how photons basically break proteins down by adding electrons. And there's all sorts of science behind what the sun or, red light therapy would do. And then the next thing that happened when I was testing something else out, you get hope, and it's you just have to be hopeful and know that doctors don't know hardly anything about chronic pain because they are not trained at all on chronic pain and nutrition, right? And you're basically the muscular system and the fascia system. So yeah, you just have to be hopeful, I think.
well, in addition to being hopeful and resourceful, I mean, I know for me, I needed at least some support and encouragement, and I know my wife kind of chimes in from time to time, and you even somebody as resourceful as I am needs a little bit of extra like hands or support or just anything external. How about, especially with what you were going through and just having the personality that you have and you're trying to build a business? What was it like? Did you have a point where you said, oh man, I can't just do all this alone? Like, I need, uh, like, other, like, people to help too.
Yeah, it's tough when you have chronic pain. So my second kid's mom, like, it's a kind of an interesting relationship at this point, but she's younger and, could not relate to what I was going through at all. I mean, most people can't. One, they just see, at the time I'm 265 pounds, but I still have all this muscle on me and a giant beard. So I look like this big, strong man. Inside of me was this massive fire and stiffness and pain and stuff going on. And just being as resilient as I am, I just, keep trying to push through it, keep trying to push through it. And you're hoping something gives way. And, until I figured out what makes it give way, it just, you just are in this, you're in a bad mindset. And I want to do everything, like that. I just feel like my whole purpose to be here is to be useful. Right. And then so when I don't ask for help much. But when things would happen where people weren't helping me and I needed help, I would get really frustrated. And it didn't create a very kind of safe living environment, just not like physically or anything like that, but just kind of emotionally for my family. Cause you can't control a lot of your emotion when you're in fight or flight because it's very reactive instead of responsive, right? You're just, and you're like, oh, darn, why did I do that? Why did I do that? Why did I do that? And every time you do it, you're like, why can't I stop doing this? This is not how my brain normally works. And yeah, and so it just, not only for, my partner, but for my son, being an older father, I needed to find a way to not be like that because I grew up in a very rough childhood and I just want my kids to I mean, I make things difficult for them intentionally sometimes because you want to build a little hormesis, get them strong, but I didn't want them to ever have fear, and I feel like I was creating that environment in my home. And so if I didn't figure it out, then I wouldn't have the relationship that I have with my kids, the same relationship.
I love that you are like self-aware enough in this way because I know for me there are a lot of things that I experience not only within my home but just in general, just with people that I know as an adult I've tried to like shift my mindset in the way that like I treat people or how I am as a husband. And I know that there are some things that affected me negatively that try as I might, it's definitely a work in progress and it's a slow progression to change some of those mindsets and habits. How could you come to like just that realization? Did you always like just going through all those struggles? Were you always just like, okay, when I hit that point in my life, I'm not gonna be that way? Like, how did you manage just your mindset with everything?
Think it's I know there's a lot of stuff that happens to you and shapes your reality, but to the core of my existence, I think I'm just a helpful person. I mean, even as like a in kindergarten, I remember there was one kid that wasn't allowed to go out and play on the playground. So instead of playing on the playground, I would go to him and make sure he was like okay. You know what I mean? Like, and I've always been that way, and I didn't realize that my circumstance was as bad as it was. I thought maybe every kid was experiencing and I just thought that was what growing up was. So I don't know. I feel like I just have, I'm a type O negative blood type, right? And so that negative blood type, there's a lot of kind of spirituality and, just, uh, a little more conscious of your environment and reality. And I think there's something about that that kind of forms my personality. Um, but yeah, I've never really been too negative of a person. And so when that stuff would happen, and I gotta be honest with you, a lot of it happened when I moved from Florida to Philadelphia. And I think a lot of when you start looking at your DNA, if you get into methylation, both of my vitamin D receptors are polymorph, are slow. So when I came up here and I lacked sunlight, I would start getting that depression and anxiety that I never experienced when I was in Florida. So it's knowing your genetics to a degree helps you kind of manage them with supplementation that gets this methylation cycle moving, and that's what controls the serotonin and the dopamine and the oxytocin, right? If you're not methylating, those things aren't being created, you're not creating happiness. And so it's I think it's just an important thing to know who you are at your base. And then once you get into these sort of weird mental places, you're just like, okay, what have I done wrong? What has pushed me here? 90% of what I point to, probably other than the sun and sunlight, is my food, right? I had to get really honest with myself about what I was doing to myself because you don't realize how much poison is actually in our food. And then when you look at like 75% of our food choices are highly processed foods. All of those contain the seed oils, which create the bad cellular, lipid layer of too many omega 6s. It all contains folic acid, which is, I think, a huge reason why people have anxiety and have depression, because it basically blocks your ability to deliver folate into the brain to manage serotonin and dopamine and all the things that make you feel good. And when we eat all these folic acid and seed oils, we're just poisoning ourselves all the time. And that's such an easy thing to do, is get those foods. And when you start cutting those out and then you reintroduce them back to yourself and then you feel how sick you become after that, you're like, okay. I mean, it's slow. It's like you're not going to just go cold turkey. It's like a girlfriend that cheats on you like 3 or 4 times. But eventually you're like, okay, I get it. I got to walk away from this food. Pizza and ice cream are the two things with me. Like, I love ice cream and I will barely touch it anymore.
Yeah, it's unfortunate with ice cream for me because I know one of the things that I have to manage, like I've been managing it like since day one, is just tummy issues. And I mean, I've opened up about this a handful of times. I'm gonna do it today because I don't know why. But one of the things I was born with was like an perforated anus. Kind of, you go back to like 1979. It's like, I don't know how they deal with any of that. I don't know if anything has changed, but it has basically like screwed my whole system just as far as like, my tummy. And I have a very particular system on how I manage it. And foods, like there's a lot of foods I used to be able to eat a little bit more, and I know ice cream, even though I do like my ice cream, I know I can't really eat it very often because as soon as I do, it's like an issue. And I'm going to spare the TMI on this because it
Yeah,
can
I'm sure you.
definitely go way too TMI. But
Yeah. So the thing about the
yeah,
diet, oh, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah. So
no,
the
you're
thing
good.
about diet yeah, is that most people are trying to find some sort of tribal diet that they want to associate with, like vegetarianism or veganism or carnivore, keto, whatever. But the reality is there's 90 things that you need, right? That do everything, that create things as cofactors for everything. And so if people ever go to my community that I've built, it's one of the free assets that I put there. It's called the world's greatest shopping list. And so there's four categories of foods basically. There's or things that you need: essential vitamins, essential minerals, essential amino acids, and essential fats. Right? So I've broken down each one of those and then listed the food categories where you can get the most bioavailable form of those things, right? So if you stuck to that and built your shopping list off of that spreadsheet, then you're basically creating a healthier environment where all the processes can start happening in the body to repair things that are broken, because your body naturally can repair itself, but only, if you're putting diesel into an unleaded, it's not going to happen, right? So these
Yeah.
are the 90 things you need, like almost consistently. And the interesting thing is one of the major reasons that people are in chronic pain is they built their collagen matrix incorrectly. You need four amino acids, which are fairly simple to get from standard American diet, even if it's bad food, like McDonald's and stuff. But the four cofactors that give the instructions to the amino acids are missing from most people's diets, and it's vitamin C, almost on a daily basis, right? You need vitamin C because when the collagen is being built, it's like a spider web. It's kind of twists the triple helix and then shoots it out of the cell. And that kind of, Spider-Man shooting the thing out of his wrist. And then that becomes your collagen. But you also need to have copper, right, in order to create a stronger foundation. And most people don't have copper in their diets whatsoever. You also need copper in order for your body to utilize iron, right? So people that have anemia, they have fine iron levels, but they don't have copper to release the iron into the bloodstream. And then there's manganese, and then there's zinc. Like zinc is a cofactor for these enzymes in your body that break down the scar tissue. So if you don't have the zinc, then those enzymes can't do their job, right? So it's like you need the four amino acids and the four cofactors in your to create a healthy collagen environment, and that's 30% of your proteins. And so it becomes glue, like Elmer's glue, rather than kind of like a slimy, bouncy, rubbery collagen matrix. It's gluing everything together. And then that traps in a lot of the other things that cause pain inside that tissue, and blood can't penetrate. And that's why like something like dry needling, acupuncture, is really good for people in chronic pain because it breaks open some of that place, creates a tear. Once the protein is torn or cleaved, the body can start removing it. Until you tear it, either with like a supplement cleaving the chemical bond or physically manipulating that tear, the body has no way of breaking it down typically on its own.
Well, just to put a much less technical perspective on all this, shout outs to uh, ordering out pizza. I think you said Domino's and McDonald's. So here of late, my wife has really been on a mission to just eat all at home and pre-cook, and just we're having all of our meals basically at home unless we go out and visit the mouse close by. And I just want to say, just piecing together my own issue, how much better it's been for me to manage all that because of eating at home. Like, I love salmon, and she'll make a lot of lunches and stuff with like
Getting the
salmon.
farm raised salmon or the wild caught?
Uh, I farm raised. I mean, it's not wild caught, I don't think, but
Watch some
she.
videos on farm raised salmon. It'll kind of there's a service where I order my fish from called Wild Alaska. $145 for the month, and you don't get through that in a whole month. And then the next month I get Wild uh, um, Pastures, which is the meat and chicken, $138 a month. Like it's like the best deal going. And then so when you think about stopping by and getting a cheesesteak, and you're like, oh, I got all this meat at home, I'm just going to go eat the good meat, right? And so you make better choices when you have the better food in the home. And especially if you're spending money on it, you want to, go eat that food instead of paying $20 for a cheesesteak.
I mean, sometimes a cheesesteak is good. That doesn't usually
Oh, I
cause
eat them
me
every
to.
once in a while, but yeah.
Yeah, I know there's one place that's very Philly oriented down here, called Delco's. That's like really, really good. But anyway,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh, so let me just kind of move this along a little bit here and just talk about like how like what's the impact that this has had on like your clients as far as like you know, do you know of any like real success stories and just yeah,
Tons.
go.
Yeah. So the supplement's less than a year old. It's, I think I launched it back toward the end of last year. And, as an entrepreneur, there's a whole bunch of things there. We could talk about trying to launch a supplement and stuff. But, and once again, so when I talk about flexibility fuel, I want to make sure I don't label it as a cure or a treatment for any disease. And these are anecdotal stories. But, one of the first people that started taking it was a good friend of mine who was for the past 12 years he's been going through surgeries for all sorts of things, which I think most surgeries are nonsense if you start really looking at what they're doing and how they're actually creating more inflammation through doing the surgery when the inflammation was the problem in the first place. But he had been on opioids for 11 years and he quit them cold turkey after taking the supplement. No withdrawal symptoms whatsoever. And he said, I have the same pain level as before, but there's no side effects, as meaning as he was taking the opioids. But the good thing is the ingredients in the supplement are known in multiple studies to break down what's causing the pain or help the body break down what's causing the pain. Another girl with fibromyalgia. I mean, it's a lot of fibromyalgia, women that take the supplement, and then just men who have arthritis is kind of the standard. But, she said, it's been however many years and she's had no relief whatsoever. And this is the first time she's ever felt any relief. There's another guy. He 12 years old, he hurt his knee in a motorcycle accident and it's been bothering him ever since, clicking, causing pain. He can't sit for too long. That pain has gone away. So, there's a lot of really good success stories. And then with the program itself, it's fairly new. It's a community platform, and then I've put the program there. And I don't like to coach people one on one until they've gone through the program themselves, because like anything, I want you to immerse yourself in it so you can understand it. Like when I used to discount religion or Christianity, I want to say the teachings of Christ. I never read the Bible, so I'm like have this opinion about things that I really have no knowledge of. And so it's when I started reading that and reading it, it seems to be more of like a self-help tool to keep us vibing high, right? If you really plug into it, it's like listening to Anthony Robbins or some other guru. It's just a really good way to keep your energy good. And so if you immerse yourself in my program, you start really kind of seeing the reality of what's causing a lot of the conditions that people are dealing with. And so, but yeah, I mean, I've got a bunch of former NFL players that are taking it where they've had shoulder pain and the shoulder pain's gone. And, my best customers are really men. I think, they've been the most active rebuyers of it. And I think that has a lot to do with is we want to be useful for our tribe, for our family, for the people around us. And we start losing our personality as we start losing movement, because our whole lives have been created in movement. And once, even just like the thought of me having to stop and turn around to turn a light switch off was daunting to me. And I still have PTSD from it. Like I think like, oh no, I can turn around. There won't be pain anymore. Right. But a lot of
Yeah.
times I'll see something. I'm like, oh no, I can pick that up now. I can tie my shoe without pain now. And, I can run 100 meters without much pain. I mean, there's still some stiffness and soreness, but, not as much as before. But yeah, there's a lot of people with the supplement itself that have a lot of great success stories.
Well, was it hard to sell something that challenges conventional medicine?
That is So yeah, I mean, so when I was going through all this stuff, I was joining all the chronic pain message boards on Reddit and Facebook and trying to give tips to people and stuff like, hey, there's some stuff here. And then when I finally released the supplement, I was like, hey, by the way, I've released this supplement. It's a very negatively minded community that's tried probably a ton of things and nothing has worked for them, or they don't know how to intentionally utilize something and, kind of look out for what might happen. But a lot of people in those communities call me like a snake oil salesman, or you can't reverse fibromyalgia. You never had fibromyalgia. You must have got diagnosed wrong, or whatever it was. And I thought I was going to come in like with that little boy in the playground, like, I'm going to help these people. It's like the opposite. It's like almost like they want to turn me away from it. So it's been tough to just even convince people not even to try it, but just ask me a question about it. Like just reach out to me, say, hey Dan, why do you think this works? Why should I take it? And yeah, it's tough, but I'm finding my niche, market. And I've been, very active with my NFL Players Association, NFL alumni guys. And yeah, so, but yeah, it's tough. It's not easy to, you think people are just going to buy it and you've got this miracle, quote unquote, thing. And yeah, there's a lot of challenges.
Well, I don't know much, but I know what I've been through, and just based on things I've seen from people who have been affected by some chronic stuff, I do know that sometimes we just gotta think outside the box and, take a shot on ourselves. And that was a big reason why I had you on Mark My Words today. And
Thank you. Yeah.
we're we're getting a little short on our usual time here, although I could talk another hour. Um, let's go ahead and give you the floor to just tell everybody how they can find you, how they can work with you, anything else that you want to add. It's all yours.
Yeah. Yeah. So the best place to find all my links and stuff is at www.linkedin.bio/undo method. That's UNDU, METHOD. Or just go to my website, which is www.undu.me. So undo.me. Yeah. And you can go there. It'll take you, you can learn about the supplement. All the ingredients are on there. I'm not hiding anything. Even if you don't want to buy my supplement, you can go buy the ingredients on your own. And you can go to the community that I've created, and it's a free community to join. There's a lot of free resources there, and then it gives you access to the undo method, which is literally like for $13, you can have it for a month. You'll get through it in like a week if you just sit down, and or even like a couple hours if you really wanted to. So it's very accessible, and I wanted to make it very accessible for people who are living with chronic pain because they have a lot of financial problems. So for my 10 years of research, give me $13 and I think you're going to have a lot of knowledge that you didn't have before.
Awesome. Well, I have a lot of knowledge that I didn't have before, and that's thanks to you. Again, Daniel Esposito, getting tongue-tied on the most important part, which is your name. Thank you for being on Mark My Words today. This was an awesome conversation, and I almost want to go on to Madden, create a player named after you, and give them.
I drafted myself in fantasy football one year. Got zero
I love it.
points. Yes.
I love it. Yeah, I almost want to go on Madden and create a career out of you, but I
340, 215 pounds, excellent hands, great blocker. So make sure you rank him up there.
I will. Hey, if I'm ranking myself, so on the college football game, how they're like connected to Madden now, I think I won like 3 or 4 Heismans. Like, I think I won the Heisman every year. This is somebody who never stepped on a football field as a player, just, more just playing with my buddies. So I don't deserve any of that. So if I can do that for myself, I can do something for you. Um, Thank you again for being on Mark My Words. One thing I always forget is to mention my own name. I'm the host, Mark Schmidt, and this is Mark My Words that you just listened to. Again, this was Daniel Esposito, who I didn't get tongue-tied saying his name. Thanks again for being here, and thank you for listening, and I will see you all soon with another episode of Mark My Words. Bye for now. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to go on a journey with me into entrepreneurship and life on Mark My Words. If you would like to learn more about me and the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt or connect with me on Instagram at Nimrod79. Video episodes of Mark My Words, as well as other content, can also be found on the Mark My Words YouTube page. Entrepreneurship can be quite the roller coaster ride. It can be a bit isolating and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let's meet here next time at the crossroads on another episode of Mark My Words.